Today, HOA Today is brought to you by Zayuk. Zayuk is a smart property system company. We provide homeowner associations and condo associations inspections that provide reserve study analysis as well as a reality capture. And we give you a visualization context for you to work from, for you to handle RFPs, requests for proposals, to handle various payments and stakeholder interests within your property. Because at the end of the day, one of the most difficult things is everyone getting on the same page, commuting information, and Zayuk, through our visualization context and through our inspections, helps create an environment where you, your stakeholders, which include your residents, your manager, your vendor, can better understand the property and what is going on the property, whether that be work orders, again, RFPs, and you can give views to various vendors through that RFP so that when they create a proposal, they actually understand what they're proposing on. Additionally, you can give them to residents or potential residents to show that you as an association have a set of standards that gives you context into your property. And for various new stakeholders as well, often incumbents, we hear about them in the political sphere, but also in the request for proposals and proposal sphere as well. When you have an incumbent that has all the information related to your property, it's actually not in your interest. Yes, it gives them good context to move forward, but if there's ever a point where you have to separate or they have to separate their services from you, you need that information. And that's what Zayik does. It provides you an infrastructure to store your information, including geographical information. So we'll continue. This is excuse me. Okay, so this is from the US Sun, and by Amethyst Martinez. Locals have ousted their HOA after the association had said they could raise prices up to $4,000 a month. In Modesto, California, homeowner shot down a plan which asked for $25,000 per unit to replace rotting staircases and steps. Those are elevated exterior elements, and SB 326 just finished, not really just a few months ago, requiring everyone to get inspections of their elevated exterior elements as well as possibly replace them. And that was related to an accident 2016 or 2017, sometime around there, when a group of, I believe, college students had a very tragic accident due to a balcony breaking, and they were on the fourth or fifth floor, so it was very tragic. This is from the Sun. When the HOA attempted to pass the almost $4 million endeavor, many had feared they would lose their homes. So the only reason I brought that up is because rotting staircases and steps, those are elevated exterior elements. SB 326, Senate Bill 326 in California, was related to staircases, steps. Elevated exterior elements are anything 6 feet or more above the ground. Walkways, that can include walkways on higher levels, that can include balconies. It seems like they have literally done nothing as far as continuing maintenance for years and years and years, one resident stated. Walnut Orchard's HOA board then said if the assessment failed, it could up their monthly fee by 20% every year, eventually pushing costs over $4,000 a month. $4,000 a month is huge. It had raised costs to $660 a month for the residents beginning next year. "90 out of 100 ballots cast agreed that the board should be removed after a 6-month battle between groups." HOA crackdowns in the U.S. States across the country are working to restrict the power of HOAs. In Minnesota, lawmakers introduced a bill that would require boards to create a schedule of fines and fees and distribute it to homeowners. Ensure homeowners can contest an HOA fine, provide reasonable time to correct rule violations. In Arizona, lawmakers are cracking down on HOA budgets. Florida, bill was passed to restrict the amounts of control HOAs have over tenant properties. Atlanta, bipartisan bills were introduced to rein in overly aggressive HOAs. California, new bill requires HOA elections to be monitored and the board to comply with certain requests. Colorado, new HOA rules require greater transparency. And Federal Fair Housing Act sets standards. That's a huge amount. And I've spoken about this before on the live stream, is that when you have years of negligence, it's very difficult to put that. And that's kind of what, give me one moment. I'm going to actually turn this off for one moment. If you have a lot of negligence, it becomes a huge issue. And then you have extreme events that occur, and there's a reaction towards those extreme events, and the reaction can be very devastating. We saw that in Florida. This SB 326 was a little more, the turnaround time wasn't so huge or so tight, but if there's negligence over decades, to expect a single set of homeowners within 1, 2, 3 years to cover for all that, it's hugely stressful for the community. And it's part of the reason homeowner associations get such a bad rap, is that it's a decentralized property ownership system where the property owners are also often the property residents, and often they're not institutional investors, but that is their primary residence, and they look at that residence as a store of value. A huge portion of their wealth is stored in that residence. And so when items like this occur, it's very distressful, because you saw this thing as a store of value. You still see it as a store of value. Additionally, you want to live there and you enjoy living there, but it's becoming a financial burden. Okay, we'll continue. HOA seeks to foreclose on 77-year-old home over pressure washing violations. Georgia homeowner living on Social Security, risk of losing their home. This is by Atlanta News First. Fees exceed $2,000. North side of his house, where off-white wall grew green algae 3 summers ago. He's fighting foreclosure after his HOA accumulated more than $9,000 in fines and legal fees. Might lose his home. Lives on about $20,000 annually from Social Security. And he developed a phobia of mail where he avoided checking it for months on end. That's understandable if you're in a lot of debt, you might be, I'm not assuming that, but people like to avoid things when they know something's coming. When they finally checked their mail in late 2022, he found a bill demanding $6,000. This is quite insidious, though, is that it takes a long time over, and then it just piles up, and it's from your HOA, your place of living. It becomes very stressful. Borrowed a pressure washer. The HOA filed for foreclosure on his home in July 2024. Lien for balance exceeding $2,000. He was charged $50 daily for 4 months, totaling more than $1,500 monthly, with 7% interest. That is a lot. Things like this are hugely the reason why people in HOAs are getting a bad rap. And with decentralized finance, with cryptocurrency, with HOA laws themselves being so highly scrutinized, and in 2025, there is no privacy. And Zayuk gives, not just is there no privacy, there's a lot of information. And you need to have a repository of that information that makes sense, that you're able to go to, that's highly available, that's logical, and that's contextually relevant, which means our vision context. So I'm excited to bring that into play and show people what's going on. And as people know, this Zayuk is expanding from HOAs and condos, and we are going into commercial and also private ownership, and as well as REITs. So it's exciting to move there, but it's a huge issue for HOA specifically. We have a voting protocol, we have your RFP protocol, the proposal protocol, various items that when you own a property, especially one that is a high portion of your wealth, this is a really important tool. And you'll notice that immediately. You'll get value from it, whether it's the voting, whether it's the model, whether it's the governance items, the app, the web app, the smart contracts, the RFP, organizing all these things, work orders. It's very powerful. Okay, so we'll continue. The president declined comment. The only homeowner in the community to take in the HOA to court since 2008. Well, that doesn't necessarily bode well for him, and not reading your mail either, because if that's the only one, then you'd assume possibly they would be fine, that would be a fine HOA, just based off the fact there's only been one lawsuit. And here's the quote from the manager: "The association has given the owner every possible opportunity, to the best of my knowledge, to resolve the issue before it got this far," unquote. The covenants for the neighborhood state that the notice shall be sent by U.S. mail. If these weren't the sorts of consequences, then people wouldn't pay. That is the argument of the attorney that represents the HOA. That's a very difficult issue. Handling these things as soon as possible is important. This is from the Palm Beach Post. Condo guest is taking up pool parking space. What limits can Florida HOA put on parking? 55 plus community, 2 community pools and a clubhouse, restricted to residents or guests using the facilities. That's the parking. Guests can park at the pools or clubhouse overnight but must move the vehicles during the day. A handicapped friend that routinely uses the handicap space at one pool facilities when visiting. And they're asking if it's right to reserve the spot. Community is not governed by ADA. ADA governs places of public accommodation, like stores and hotels. Doesn't apply to private communities. And the ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Question is whether your association has the right to impose rules. This is by Ryan Poliakov. Doesn't apply to private communities. We read that. And they say that if they wanted to have a rule where the handicap spaces were only for pool guests and no overnight stay, it would be found unreasonable. It would be found reasonable and enforceable. But keep in mind that disabled persons are entitled to accommodations of your rules if required to due to their disability. Okay, next. Neighbors Reno wrecked my AC. I don't know what a Reno is. Now no one wants to pay for the fix. I live in a condo. Building has 2 floors with 4 units on the top floor and 4 on the bottom. Reno is renovating, hired a contractor, and lost central AC cooling. And then they spoke to the contractor to see if there was any problem because the AC pipe runs that way. There was then a dispute. So this is the quote. The cement floor had a trench dug in it, and I saw mine and my neighbor's Freon lines running through the trench. I called my AC and the tech told me I had no Freon in my system. The tech ran Freon through my compressor outside, and we went back into my neighbor's unit and saw Freon bubbling up in one of the 2 pipes running through the trench. The contractor nicked my Freon pipe when they dug the trench. And then the neighbor arranged for the contractor to repair the pipe and fill the Freon in the system. He was charged $320 and asked the neighbor and then no one was willing to pay for that $320. And the author of this article states there's not many options outside of, which is Ryan Poliakov, not many options outside of small claims court. The association wasn't involved. And since they weren't going through the association and the repairs and all that weren't through there, they can't really go through the association. That's what the argument is. I'm not a lawyer and none of this is legal advice. We're just reading. But Ryan Poliakov, a partner at Poliakov Backer LLP, board certified specialist in condominium and plan development law. It's probably not worth your time or effort to chase neighbor over $320. But if you want to, that's what small claims court is for. Okay. That's very stressful, and that creates a difficult environment for everyone. Okay, this is from the Aspen Times, APCHA, educating HOAs on Aspen's energy upgrade possibilities. Aspen Core will be presenting on funding and more for the Housing Association. Core is the Community Office for Resource Efficiency. They recommend the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority are taken up on an HOA education series highlighting what Core can do for HOAs. Hosted at Aspen City Council Chambers. Committed to protecting and preserving deed-restricted housing while investing in residents' quality of life. That's APCH's commitment. Lower utility bills, predictable operating costs, cost-effective upgrades, tight building envelopes, and increased health and comfort are core to the initiatives. High-altitude winters in other buildings create a recipe for high energy use. Changes like modern heat pumps, smart controls, and tighter building envelopes can improve comfort during cold snaps and wildfire smoke events, and cut back on energy. Electrifying space and water heating reduces local emissions. Senior Energy Concierge for Core, discussing upgrades, funding, and expert guidance. So this is a plan to speak about with various areas in that county about energy, and it's very good that they have this core. I mean, Aspen is a fairly affluent area supposedly, so it makes sense. Okay, we'll continue. So this is by Good IS, written by Adam Albright Hanna. Viral TikTok shows the president confronting a dad with a simple demand: keep his kids inside. Because there are multiple houses complaining. And then this is like a Reddit post where nothing really occurred, but it was posted on TikTok. It's good to keep in mind that there's no privacy. So no matter what you do and whatever you do, and I host a live stream called Information Security Now, and that's a root pillar of that live stream is there's really no privacy, and HOAs too. That's why I think the industry is getting turned on its head a little bit. Not necessarily, but a little bit, in the sense of this industry you didn't have protocols that allowed for hyper transparency. And people in HOAs, especially with a governmental body, and we're seeing it in the federal government too, where there's hyper transparency. There are certain bureaucrats, governmental individuals who, once they do something, it gets posted all over the internet. And so HOAs have to deal with this too. They're a root government body, HOA, local municipality, state, federal, and they have to deal with this hyper transparency aspect. In most, I would say, I don't know, but A lot of HOAs are fine, run fine, but the idea of hyper transparency has turned a few bad apples on its head. And you can see that we go through that. It doesn't happen too often where something extremely insidious happens, but it does happen and it becomes a huge issue. And people, even if it's not purposefully not helping you, when you have a huge portion of your wealth invested in this asset, you want to make sure it's being run effectively so that your return will be as high as possible and the store of value that you're investing in is being run effectively. That's one of Warren Buffett's top pillars is executive team. Is the manager doing a good job? Does the community feel the manager is doing a good job? How is the board? How are the sentiments of the board for through the community? How is the board speaking with the community? Being a board member is extremely difficult and there's very little reward. It's almost extremely, there's very little reward to doing it other than you get to have a say in what happens on your property. But at the end of the day, it's still important that you understand who these executive members are so that the business that you're investing in, your HOA, heavily investing in, not just like small investment, you understand is actually working effectively, not putting you in a state of liability with degrading assets and poorly managed finances, but is actually building a community that is operated, has high operational effectiveness. You can see, you can feel that things are going more appropriately. Well, thank you, everyone. That's it for today. This is HOA Today. HOA Today is brought to you by Zayuk. Zayuk provides you reserves inspections, reality capture inspections, and gives you a digital twin of your property, survey grade level digital twin, so that you and your stakeholders can understand and communicate about the context of your properties that you put so much money against for payments, for maintenance, for various other items.